our next session, which is on life writing in Melanesia. This is continuing our conversation this morning about how arts and culture shape our contemporary Melanesian way, or as we're saying now, shape our Melanesia way forward. So my name is Anna Naupa, and I'd like to introduce this panel. Hopefully my mic can be fixed so I don't keep dropping out. The reason we propose this session is that life writing in Melanesia is an important aspect of Melanesian literary arts, and it gives us insights into the experiences of Melanesian identity. It helps us shape our understanding of a contemporary Melanesian way. And did you know that the bulk of Pacific life writing, which is basically writing about personal experience in a particular context, in a particular place, did you know that? Maybe please fix my microphone. Okay, I have to swap the microphone. That mic, this one is not so good. Thank you. Most of Pacific life writing is actually out of Melanesia. So it is wonderful that we have amongst us two already published writers who have written their autobiographies and memoirs. Dame Carol Kiddu from Papua New Guinea is the author of the autobiographical A Remarkable Journey, and she'll be reflecting on the memoir writing process. We have Sethi Regan-Vanu from Vanuatu, who is the author of many autobiographical publications, including one called Life Blom Me, From Village to Nation. And he'll also speak to the challenges and opportunities of autobiographical writing. We welcome also Teresa Meki from Papua New Guinea, who's been sharing her work on reviving biographical writing in Papua New Guinea, and particularly around what happened to the Papua New Guinea Contemporary Biography Dictionary. And then there is a group of us represented by Rebecca Olu Hassan and myself, including Mary Sovik and Howarth and a range of others who collaborated in Vanuatu on a creative non-fiction biographies for children. So as a genre, there are many ways to record life histories. We can do it in film, we can do it in radio, we can write. And so we're going to talk about that process of writing. And we have 1 hour for this session. So I will now hand over to Pastor Sethi Regan-Vanu to open up with his thoughts about the role that life writing plays in our Melanesian identity.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. I'm Sethi Regan-Vanu. And I'd like to take this opportunity, first of all, to express my thanks and appreciation to Anna Naupa and her team for organizing this symposium as part of the Melanesian Festival of Arts, which is taking place here in Portland. I do hope and encourage every one of you, when you find time, you're going to join our brothers and sisters from Melanesian countries who are putting the celebrations for us. This is, for Vanuatu and for all of us, it's a rare occasion, and we are privileged to be part of it in this way. The art festivals that are taking place this time comprise dancing, as you have seen, singing, art and craft, cooking, weaving and carving, and storytelling maybe, and sand drawing, as well as magic. All these are part of the wealth and riches that Melanesian Melanesia represents. Now I'm going to say something about what I've been asked to do. Back in 2012, I was invited to a symposium organized by Australian National University to talk about how I came to write my first book, Life on Me, From Village to Nation, this one here, if you have not seen it. There, Dame Carol Kidu from Papua New Guinea, who is sitting beside me, also participated in the same symposium to speak about her own book. The theme of the ANU symposium was political life writing. Political life writing. And both of us happen to be politicians before. So our books were about our life as politicians. In my presentation, I spoke about the encouragement I was given to write and how I came to write the entire book. I've never done it before. First time. I spoke of how hurt and angry I was about the situation that led to my political downfall. The political intrigue and infighting within my political party, which led to the split within that party. I myself was not involved in the problem that led to the split within the party, but I became a victim of that. So I was angry about that, and I decided writing a book about it would give me an opportunity to expose the problem. So at this juncture, I want to make a point that I believe a feeling of anger and hurt can lead a person to do some extraordinary thing about it. And I think that feeling led me to express my feelings. I also wanted to put in record the situation of the country during the colonial period as I experienced it, and how we had worked together to win our political freedom and became who we have been as an independent nation, a freedom which we have enjoyed till today. In the same book, I talk about my life growing up in the village, my education, and my work in the church, in politics, and in the government. And to enliven my story in the book, I used photos of which I happen to have a good collection in the numerous photo albums that I have kept, and in fact still keep till today. So, in a nutshell, what the book Life on Me, From Village to Nation, what I've said, it represents that book carries. You're going to get a chance to find out more about that in detail if you happen to get hold of the book yourself and read it. I have given a copy of the presentation I made at the ANU Symposium to Ananaupa for her to make it available to the participants. But today, I want to talk about the challenges in writing. So let me now say this. For Pacific Islanders like me, writing a book is not a straightforward exercise. It comes with its challenges. And so now, I want to share with you some of the challenges I believe people in the Pacific generally and within Melanesian region face in writing book, or book writing. The first challenge is writing. As you know, writing is not our traditional forms of communication. Our way of passing messages from one person to another is through mouth. That is to say, messages are passed on from one person to another through the word of mouth. Naturally, there are not many books authored by people of Melanesia, or Pacific for that matter, in circulation in comparison with hundreds and thousands of books written by people whose cultures have for centuries included writing. So we don't naturally think of recording things down on paper or in a book. The second challenge is writing in a language that is not your native tongue. It is not easy to express or to convey your views in a language that is not your own, especially if you have not mastered sufficiently that language to be able to use it competently. In Vanuatu, we usually have to use English, French, or even Bishnama. The third challenge is the cost factor. Writing, for many, can be hard and certainly time-consuming. Writing entails trying to communicate some truth or facts for someone else to be able to read and understand. And it involves sitting down and thinking carefully through what to say before you write. This is equally true even with one's own native language. Because in writing, you are communicating with someone else without you being there in person with them. And you always have to think if what you are saying is clear to others. I have written a few books, and for me, I have had to prepare limited drafts or initial drafts of my books in my own handwriting, which is slow and involves use of pencils, pens, and papers. Then when what I have written down appears satisfactory to me, I will then get it typed out, and here again my typing speed is very slow. And when my typed draft is completed satisfactorily to me, I then take it to the printer for printing. And at this stage, I have to work with the printer, going carefully through the work I have done, to be sure the printer includes all the details correctly and satisfactorily. And finally, if everything is satisfactory for a book to be printed out, then comes the cost consideration. And for me, I've had to pay for the cost of printing 4 of my books by myself, and it is not cheap. Consequently, it puts limit to how many copies you are able to have, and thus limit its circulation. At the end of the day, there is no guarantee that you will be able to sell all your books, to be able to recoup some of your expenses within your lifetime. So, the process of getting a book produced can be costly in terms of the effort put into the production of the book and the associated cost, including scope of its circulation. However, please take note that I am not trying to discourage anyone in book writing. I have simply been stating the situation as it applies to me. Let me say this though, that at the end of it all, it gives you as an author or the writer a feeling of fulfillment, a feeling of pride and satisfaction that you have written a book which can tangibly be held, used, and hopefully enjoyed by people other than yourself. I've got more things to say, but I keep saying, no, remind me about this, don't remind me about me. Let me, respect me. which invited me to speak. So, I don't want to see that. However, so, let me say this, or I should say that. The fourth challenge is digital technology. And this has become the main means of communication for people today, to the extent that it has almost replaced writing for certain sections of our communities. It has proven to be a faster way of getting messages from one person to the next, and proven to be more convenient for increasing sections of our communities. For example, users of this technology are quick to take a photo of what is written on blackboard in classroom, or simply take a photo of what they want out of a book using smartphone, taking time to read, write, or even read information before them. And I often wonder if people bother to read books that are available in the libraries. Recently, I have had students coming to my home to hold interviews with me, to learn more about the political history of Vanuatu and my own involvement in this. I expected them to take notes of what I was saying, but instead, they simply recorded my conversation on their phones. I showed them the books I have published in my life and my engagements, including other books in the same subjects, and mentioned that the books are in their school libraries. I expected them to want to sit down or take the books away to read. They were more interested in taking photos of the contents of books to take home with them. This is, we have to accept, the trend of today. Another challenge is loss of language. We've heard speakers before us saying the same. Indigenous languages are fast disappearing due to the users dying out and their offspring using other languages of communication, or the prevalence in use of language of education, trade and commerce, and the dominant use of Bishnama in the case of Vanuatu. This is a worrying factor to me as an Vanuatu. I would like to challenge potential writers sitting here to make an attempt to write books in your own native language or vernacular, and in arrangements that can easily be read by us. And I leave that with you. Another challenge is consistency in language spellings and uses. In Vanuatu Bislama, our national language, there is absence of consistency in the spelling and the way the Bislama is used, making it difficult to want to read the Bislama. I often find it easier reading an article in English than reading the same article in Bislama. Now I'm going to talk about other aspects of writing. Finally, let me now say something about other aspects of book writing. Writing a book is a wonderful opportunity for the writer to make known or share his or her experience and perspectives on things that the person himself is involved in. That is unique and means something special to the writer within the context. And so, in this respect, I want to encourage people to write, because if they don't, then no one else will be able to relate the experience in the same way and with the passion that the writer alone can do. In this respect, I want to encourage people of Vanuatu, the people of Melanesia, the people of the Pacific, to develop the love for reading and writing. And here I want to suggest that there are endless topics or themes to write about. One can do short traditional custom stories of a few pages, life story of a situation with which you have an association, your own personal story, and write in the language of your choice, be it your own vernacular language, talk Pidgin English, or Bishnama. You will come to like and enjoy writing once you have started doing it. So I want to encourage you to write and begin now. Make sure you include photos in your books. Photos help to enliven the story in the book. Write while you are young and able to write yourself. Do not wait until you are old and are not able to write anymore and have to have someone else to write for you. Remember, having someone else writing for you is not the same as you doing it yourself. And in writing, try to avoid using difficult words that cannot be understood by other readers. Words like academic jargon or scientific technical words. I like to think here that it is possible to express or convey high academic or technical ideas in simple languages of ordinary people. So write in a way that you can be understood by everyone. Finally, in this presentation, I would like to end by calling on all our national leaders in Melanesian to support the role of the Melanesian Institute in Papua New Guinea, Institute of Pacific Studies, or USP, to help Pacific writers to be able to publish their work. Because we, the people of Melanesia, as we've heard, have so much to share through writing in order to enrich our society and the world at large. Thank you.
Thank you for that excellent insight and encouragement too into why we must write while we still can. And so I would like to now introduce Teresa Necki, who will be sharing about what it means to write biographies in PNG and the journey that she's been going on herself.
Morning, Ogata. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Necki. Before I start, I'd like to just mention my colleague, Nicholas Hall. We worked on this paper to interrogate what happened to the PNG Dictionary of Contemporary Biography. It's a mouthful, and I can't even get the acronym right. So if I mix it up, you know what I'm talking about. In 1984, the government of Papua New Guinea, at that year it was 100 years since colonial intrusion or colonial power had come into the country, and they wanted to produce a series of projects to commemorate nation building. And the dictionary was one of its projects. Next slide. So the idea was that the dictionary would write little pieces of biographical information about people who helped shape the nation. People like Michael Somare, Sir John Geist, and others who were instrumental throughout the process. Now this idea had already come about at the University of Papua New Guinea in 1974, and they had already started this collection of short biographies of nation builders. So when that committee had started, they just piggybacked onto that existing work already. In 1982, Alton Brush was appointed as UPNG's Vice Chancellor, and he was a real push behind that project to go forth. So they had he got the Prime Minister at that time, Pius Winty, to be the patron of that project, and they got a lot of big men, connected men, to be part of the committee to get that project started. But they needed an editor to manage the project. In that case, they got Australian Bougainville historian Jim Griffith to manage the project, and he worked with Andrew Griffith, who was a librarian at the time at UPNG. Those two are not related, they just share the same last name. We'll go to the next slide. So these are just pictures of the archives that Nick and I have gone through to put this paper together. And these are the initial people involved in this project. So at the far end, that's Jim Griffith with the hat, and John Wyker was PNG's first historian. He was also on the board of that project. Next slide. Now that's just a list of how it looked like back then. Next slide. Yeah, so, or maybe go to the previous one, sorry. So initially the date for that project was set to be completed in 1986. So that's only 2 years to do such a massive project. So it was a bit ambitious to begin with. And then they postponed it to 1988. Still nothing happened. At that time, the infrastructure, a lot of the facilities, they had a problem. Once they organized a list of people to get their biographies from, they had to go and look for researchers, train them how to do this, and then equipment was also an issue. So I think, personally, I believe it wasn't the right time back then to do this project. We also had Jim Griffith's apartment in Port Moresby was broken into, and rascals took off with the tape recorder and all the recordings of these biographies. And so we had little technical issues, big ones and small ones such as that. Towards 1989 and 1990, it started to peter off, and we couldn't find any archival information on what happened. But there's at least 700 biographical records left at the New Guinea collection at UPNG Library to this day. And we've been in touch with some of the librarians there, and they still have this carton, this box of biographical information about important Papua New Guineans that has never seen the light of day. They're just sitting there. So the project that Nick and I would like to put forward is that we're coming up to 50th anniversary of Papua New Guinea's independence in 2 years' time, and we would like to revive this and revisit this project. Some of the problems that I had as a researcher of women and elections was finding stories about women politicians. Now, as you see up there, thank you, Dame Carol has her biography there, so she really helped me with my studies. And Dame Josephine Abijah, who was one of the first women politicians in Papua New Guinea, 1977. And then on the blue, there's a collection of stories about women in PNG. That is in need of an update. There's so many women who have come through and have done amazing things, and their stories are not documented. In 2012, I was part of the Power Mary project. This is a film documentary series where we went around PNG and captured narratives of 6 women in leadership in different sectors doing different things. These women are not as popular because they're not politicians, and it's not politicians' fault that they're most documented. It's just the nature of how it is. But that project really opened my eyes to include women in storytelling and documenting their stories. And the late M. Dixon Waiko wrote about how Papua New Guinean women were left out of the colonization and missionization process. So if I'm trying to, talk and write about women in politics and leadership, I need information to mainstream their stories to the younger generation, so that women as leaders is normalized, and that can't be normalized when they're not written about. So that's my personal motivation for working with Nicole on this project. The next slide. So while we were looking through these archival records, I found these 3 women, which I never knew existed, and it was so amazing for me that I discovered Pia Kila, who was the first TV presenter, and Florence Griffith, who was the Papua New Guinea's first female librarian, Ada Solomon, first woman editor. So you see how for the women, I'm always saying first, because at this stage, that's what we're getting. We need to get the stories of the first out, other than just the first politicians. So as we go and revive this new project, the previous one, it was composed of mostly colonial administrators, politicians, some rugby players, and maybe just a handful of women. And PNG is also a hybrid traditional society. I would like to see chiefs being in the project as well in different societies to show that we're just not, Western. We have different sectors of our environment, our country represented. Just the last, I think that one. Oh, it's not in order. That's all right. I think I talked about the problems. So, in 2000, the guy, the PNG guy on this side, his name is Sam Kaima. So he was a young man when he worked with Jim Griffith on the initial project. So in 2000, he tried to revive it. And he sent emails to both Jim Griffith and Professor John Waiko. But we have no records of how far those correspondence went. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2010, just a few months after Jim Griffith. So just to commemorate them and the work that they've done, we also want to. There's so many work done already that we can't let it sit there at the UPNG library, anymore. Next slide. So going forward, we'd like to have an online dictionary of biography, and if we find enough funding to have a physical book like the Taktumas or a dictionary, at least in every PNG library, would be so amazing. I talked to a lot of young people in Papua New Guinea. They don't know who Naharuni was, and that breaks my heart because she was such a power Mary. She was so amazing. And I grew up in the States, so when I was little kids knew George Washington and Jefferson and Adams. And it was such a part of their identity, but PNG children don't really have that. They just have what is in front of them right now, but not so much as who was there before. Next one, please. So we have a couple of resources available online. This is an online sort of archive of PNG leaders that's managed by John Ritchie from Deakin University. And if you see the list up there, these are just politicians or people in the public eye. Again, reinforcing the need to build up on that and diversify the type of people that we include in the new dictionary. And this is Sir Rabi Namalia. It's funny that the first time Nick and I presented this paper, just the Monday before he had passed away, and it really reinforced the need to revive this because himself and Naharuni and Sir Michael Samare, they're all now part of our history, and people coming up younger than me, they'll never have the chance meeting to see them at Boraka Food Wall or at the market. These are truly historical figures that unless we immortalize them in some way, we will miss out. So people won't know them unless they're directly related to them, and we shouldn't have that. They should be accessible to everyone else. Anyway, that's the gist of the project, and that's what we hope to achieve to launch in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, and we are so lucky to have heard from Pastor Sethi Regenvanu talking about the importance of writing this in our own words while we can, to Teresa sharing how Papua New Guinea's journey of people passing on so quickly before their stories can be immortalised. So I have the honour to now introduce Dame Kawakidu from Papua New Guinea, who has, like Sethi Regenvanu, is a former politician and in the public eye, and she'll be sharing her reflections on the memoir writing process.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Julie, to Pastor and to Teresa, who set the scene beautifully, and I got nothing prepared. So apologies for that, except a whole lot of things running around in my head. And the first thing running around in my head is that Baka Bina should become a national treasure of Papua New Guinea. Where are you, Baka? We need thousands of them in Papua New Guinea to tell stories so we can forget about Snow White and Cinderella. I love it. Right. My story in writing is a bit like Pastor's. I wrote textbooks originally. As I was a teacher and I was writing textbooks for lower high school. And then I wrote initially out of sheer anger about the way my late husband was treated as the first Indigenous Chief Justice of Papua New Guinea. And it was decided by the government of the day, which is their prerogative, that he would not be reappointed after 13 years. And there was a lot of things going on at the time, and I was extremely angry about it all. So it was very similar. It was passion and anger that caused me to write my first life story. I was lucky in that I had a publisher, because when I was writing textbooks with Pearson Educational, well then one of the fellows there asked me to write my story. And so I had a publisher ready for it, which is a great thing. And I will say the editors were very kind to me. But they edited, but they didn't really change anything very much, except the title of the book. I hate the title, A Remarkable Journey. But they said my title wouldn't work. My title was Never Ask Me to Choose. Because that's what my late husband said to me when we were very young, during the White Australia policy times, and we met in high school, and we eventually decided that I pushed that we should get married. And he said, okay, Carol, but never ask me to choose. Never ask me to choose between you and my people. Because I tell you now, I will not choose you. I cannot choose you. I will have to choose my people. So for me, that was a very significant thing that happened in my life, because when I found the cultural interface of living in a Motu society really difficult, I used to, he'd remind me, Carol, and I felt that very much. But other than that, my editorial experience was very good. A lot of water has been under the bridge since then, and the story is rose-tinted glasses, because it was rose-tinted glasses at the time. And I am intending to write again. I've started to write again. I was asked by a publisher to write and offering to publish for me for Macmillan, and then he went over to Alan Unwin, and I kept delaying, and now he's no longer in publishing, so I've lost my publisher. But I am going to ANU in a few months' time to start, and I have Teresa there as a mentor, thank God, to start reworking and rewriting the story. One thing I struggle with is identity. Who am I? I don't deny the fact I am a gum tree. I'm a gum tree from Brisbane. I hope that on this gum tree there's some lovely orchids growing from my country of choice in the end and my nationality of choice. But I am a gum tree. And as I've been doing some interviewing of elders recently, it reminded me again, this whole thing of Millicent said, it is in the blood. But I am trying to understand, is it in the psyche, is it in the wiring of the brain too, to truly understand Indigenous society if you have not grown up in as a child? I've learned a lot, but I still find it very difficult. And I'm worried that our Indigenous Melanesians will lose all of this. I vividly recall my husband saying to me when he'd be explaining that Auntie so-and-so, this one is the son, this one is this one, the genealogies that are there in the wiring of the brain of Melanesians, I believe. Is in the wiring of the brain of younger Melanesians. I think there are skills that are maybe not there anymore, because no matter how hard I tried, I could not remember it. And maybe it's just that I'm very dumb, but I couldn't. It was not there in the way my brain was wired, I've decided. So my identity now, I don't know what I am, but that's one thing I have to think about when I write. I cannot write on behalf of Papua New Guineans, because I'm not a Papua New Guinean by birth, and I think that's very important to have the Melanesian writers. That's why I said that Baka must become a national treasure, and we must do it. If Australia can spend, I don't know how many 100 million on promoting rugby league in Papua New Guinea, wonderful, wonderful for nation building, but how about spending some money too on helping to get our Indigenous people to write? The other thing is authenticity that worries me in thinking about life writing, how to be authentic. And this has become quite a problem in my new stage of writing. As I said before, my first autobiography was kind of rose-tinted glasses, and it ended when I entered politics. And it was all kind of nice. But since leaving politics and now going into another phase of my life as an elder, it's not been quite as easy. And I'm finding that if I take off the rose-tinted glasses and tell the story as it is now, it wasn't then, I will kind of break many cultural protocols. Because at present now, in Papua New Guinea, certainly in the Motu culture, what people are calling custom is not custom as I saw it practiced before. It's abuse of custom quite often. And often it takes on a commercial, financial element. And if I start talking about this and some of the challenges that have made over issues against women, against all sorts of people, and marginalization over land in ways that are not custom, if I talk about these things, there's a problem. Irutama Bainidika. The elements of the spirits of before will spoil it. And I said to a nephew, I'm writing my story again. Do you think I should tell about the challenge on the land that's been made on us, the violent challenges on our land, which are quite actually wrong, but things are changing. And he looked. I said, Nasi, Dobahera, tell me, should I write about it? He could not answer yes. although he knew that custom had been changed. Because to do that, you don't write about these uncomfortable things within the family. It's all... My children are saying to me, for heaven's sake, Mum, write it as it is. Many Papua New Guineans will be thankful if you write it as it is now, because it's not custom. So there are many struggles in writing. What do you and what do you not say? Do you cross the boundaries of cultural dictates, you know? And so I'm finding that I'm struggling with it, but I think I will kind of tell it as it is, but try to make it in an analytical way. What is happening in society now? And we've talked a lot this morning, and I'll finish now, don't tell me a thing. And we've talked a lot this morning about the colonization and decolonization process. And Barker spoke about the mobile phone and the society we're in now. And in my thinking, colonization did a huge amount of damage, but it had an end. And now people are decolonizing, and we've heard such inspirational stuff this morning. But we're now in the era of globalization. And globalization has no end unless we try to define an end to it. And this is something that bothers me. And I think writers, who are the philosophers of the society, should start talking about this whole issue of how do we manage globalization in Indigenous societies. And I'm not from Indigenous society. I married into it, I try to understand it, but I never pretend to fully understand. And unfortunately, too many outsiders come into the Indigenous societies and view it through the Western lens. And I can tell you, it's a wrong way to view. And to get people to view through an Indigenous lens is a much harder thing. So there's a lot of work to be done on how to manage globalization and in our writing and our life stories. So I assume that all of the young people here will be starting to frantically write and analyze what is happening today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dame Carol Kidu. We have one final panelist, and we'll introduce Rebecca Olo.
Thank you so much, Anna, and just like to acknowledge the previous speakers and the wisdom and that's actually sitting up here, plus in the room. I guess, you know, for us it's picking on the touch points of what has already come up, because there's some kind of similar things that have come up through the conversations that have already gone. And so this morning, as Anna mentioned, there is a whole team behind the Taftumas, a team of writers and editors and graphic designers and artists and people that are also trying to get it out of different mediums like radio. And so there's a whole community out there that's being represented through this presentation and touching on the different points. I don't know if many of you have seen this book, but this is the second volume of Taftumas, Taftumas Becoming Vanuatu, and it's in English and French. So you've got the two languages, the two of the official languages of Vanuatu. Bislama is the other one, and we've also translated to Bislama for radio to make sure that there is, coverage and that it's going on radio and is accessible to lots of communities out there. So just to touch on a little bit of the journey of this. And touching on the point that Pastor Sethi made about your writing being political and the political writing that's come out of a different generation that's come through, but it's for us, we've had the first volume of Taftumas, and there was really a demand to kind of now do a second volume of Taftumas. The first volume was out in 2020 to celebrate Vanuatu's 40th anniversary. We're now in the 43rd year of independence of Vanuatu. Later this week, actually, and then we wanted to do the second volume to really kind of bring out those independent stories following the first publication that came out. So, and touching on the point that Teresa made about those political figures who are still with us today, some of them, and some of them have passed on. But for us it was very important because Vanuatu is a very new democracy and is newly independent to kind of really capture those while we have that moment to do that with a lot of the political figures like Pastor Sethi and others still with us. So that was a very important part of that and a sense of urgency to really get those down. So this artwork is by an E11 student and it's a picture of Father Gérard Lemagne at the Independence Rally, which is one of the stories that we had. Next slide. So this presentation really reflects on this journey and this development of the book, the Taftomas books, especially focus on the second volume. And really the focus of this was to target Year 8 students in the social science classes and to really, touching on some of the points that had come up, to really kind of broaden the narrative of the people and the struggles around independence, because there is not just the one story that's been told, but there are multiple stories and people who have contributed to the movement. And although the Vanuatu independence story was part of the curriculum, students knew a small slice of it, and we wanted to give them a bit more than just that slice, to give them a broader view and a more inclusive view of what this is and the different individuals and groups that have been part of that journey. So really our focus is kind of producing these mini biographies that are accessible to be read but also listened to on radio. Yes, and so you will see in the picture, this is one of the artwork, and this represents a group of stories. These were the secretaries and the teachers who were part of the movement for independence, and sometimes these stories have not been coming through as strongly, so we wanted to make sure that those were very much a part of the stories. Yes, and so this is an artwork that was done by our youngest artist. She was 8 years old at that time, Jana Sobik, and it's one of those stories that's highlighting the role of the literary arts in Vanuatu's independence narrative. And I think coming back to the point that Vapu made, about Dame Carol Kinnan made, about the role of literature. And this was an important part of that, to make sure that we captured that. An important one that we wanted to make sure was included was around the role of media in life writing, and I can reflect on my own journey as I was doing my own research, but also other researchers who were involved in the writing, and because these stories were not really available, it was really having to go to the media to find those stories and doing a bit of research to find out the information. At that point when we were doing the writing, it was in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and so there was no opportunities to kind of get together, but really kind of connect online as well. So the role of kind of digital media, but also the digital platforms as a key research kind of opportunity. And also in a way it's the role of a kind of traditional media to connect up with the writers and the people that are telling the stories, and also to be able to source information. And as I say, I was doing a bit of research on one of the stories, and it was amazing to see that this particular story had a lot of international media coverage, and being able to get that to really kind of substantiate the story. That was an important part. So this next one, yes, it's the role of family members, and I think Dame Carol made this point as well, and Teresa, you did also, around the permissions, but also the importance of including those family members in the storytelling, because some of these people, especially for some of the biographies of the people who had already passed on. And families held parts of the stories that we then work with families to get the stories, but also permissions around the story. And like I said, some of the people featured had passed on, so making sure that we got the permissions to publish and that the families were happy with the stories that was being told. Next slide. Yes, so I'll now pass on to Anna to reflect on some of that going forward.
Thanks, Bex, and I'll do this quite quickly. We had a children's literature focus. The reason being, as we've heard from speakers this morning and from our fellow panellists, that we felt a real urgency and importance in translating stories that some may know into stories that we all should know as part of our national identity here in Vanuatu. So for this reason, we felt it important to work with children themselves, not only adults writing, and of course family members, media and so on, but students, and we engage them through their artwork. So we've been showing pictures here because these are all student artwork, and you can see the range of talent that we have. But also to work with a very small community, but we are glad it's growing here in Vanuatu, a small community of writers, to start to nurture a few outlets for the type of writing. This was a specific type of writing. People write in so many ways, but this was also part of the practice of writing and honing our skills. So there's a lot of value in this creative non-fiction and mini biographies, and here we have two images, again, by children from Year 10 and Year 9. One is about a former independence rebellion leader, Jimmy Stevens, and a Chinese-Vietnamese Vanuatu businessman who helped make it possible for Vanuatu to have flags in every island on Independence Day. So, really recognising the different types of contributions that people made. Some people did say to us, why did you use children's artwork and not photos? And I think, we've heard, he said it's really important. I think, okay. Hello? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. And we used photos where we could, but we also wanted to engage students as much as possible and have their interpretation. So we were very fortunate to have the generosity of those who gave permission, including Pastor Seppi, whose granddaughter drew his picture, to agree with their non-photo version of the image. The other aspect, I think, around just challenges, we've heard about the panel talk about challenges of authenticity, the challenge of cost, of personal time cost, as well as publication cost. But also when we're writing biographies or mini biographies and speaking with families and people for their very personal stories, there were times when we had to come in with a researcher's hat on just to gently correct facts and dates and around memory, and that was a very sensitive process, but just making sure that their story is not edited out, but the little facts that might affect the the reach of the story and the take-up of the story, making sure that we were historically accurate was a big part of that. And of course making sure our sources of information were verified. So throughout the whole process, families and those participating got to approve every step of the way, how their final story ended up. So we're just going to stop there. It's awkward being the moderator and presenting right then. So I just want to say thank you to all the panellists. I'm sure we have 10 minutes for questions. And if I'd like to just join me in giving a big hand, please, to the panellists. And we'll take questions from the floor. If you could please raise your hand. So we have one over here, and we might take a few questions at a time. So we'll take up to 2 to 3 questions, and then we'll come back to the panelists to respond as a group before we wrap up the panel.
Merci pour la présentation. Ma question c'est, vous avez collecté des histoires auprès des familles pour pouvoir faire une publication. Est-ce qu'il y a eu des histoires que vous avez collectées auprès des familles, mais que vous n'avez pas le droit de publier, mais vous avez quand même fait le travail de collectage?
Yeah, I heard what you said. Did you collect any stories from families that you weren't allowed to actually publish them or edit them?
Thank you. We'll take that as the first question. If we have any more questions, one here, please. And is anyone on this side of the room ask a question, just so we can prepare the walker?
Thank you. My name is Kumir Angelov, and I'm a linguist. I've been working on the languages of Vanuatu for a few years, and for my PhD I documented the Aham language of South Malekula. And when we linguists do that, we usually record stories, or we record people speaking in their language. And one of over 100 stories that I recorded of Aham was the life story of Aysen Opet, who was also a politician during the time of independence. And then he told his story in the vernacular, and then with the help of some young people from the community, we wrote it down in the vernacular. We also translated it into Bislama in English, and now it's online. From memory, I think he talked for about 20 or so minutes. So it's not a very long story, it's not enough for a book, but I just wanted to suggest, this is not a question, more of a comment or suggestion, that this is an example of a way where we can involve younger people and others in the community who can help in documenting these life stories, even if people are not ready or in other ways not able to write their own autobiographies. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, I will pass it back to the panel to respond and make their final closing thoughts. Perhaps, Rebecca, you could take the first question about the collection of family stories that were not included in Taftumas. And then we'll go to Pastor Sethi, Dan Karakidu and Teresa to do some final remarks. I'll answer that question on the family. So there were aspects of family stories we did not include. Part of that was thinking about the audience. So for a young audience, what might be appropriate and permissible in schools to write about. So that was one part of it. The other part was sometimes in researching stories, there's information that's shared, but it's not necessarily for the public. So again, we were very sensitive to that, and acknowledging also the right that families have to decide what they choose to put in writing. If that helps. So now we'll pass to do some final remarks on the role of life writing in Melanesia as part of our Melanesian way forward. Yes, if Pastor Sethi, just to give your final thoughts on the topic, noting we had a comment from the floor about how language researchers can also play a role to help with capturing stories.
The questions. Repeat that, please.
So there was a comment from the floor. It was more of a comment. It wasn't a question. they were just saying that another way to support writing of people's stories is to use linguistic research, which collects stories
Yes.
and then translates.
Yes, I agree totally with the approach you took. I can't say any more. I think perfect approach. Sorry? Involving young people, yes. I don't have any
You're
comments
saying-
to say that affirm your approach and engage young people, the community members. So, is that enough?
And if there are any last thoughts that you'd like to share about life writing and last ideas to leave the audience as we wrap up our panel.
No, I think just write your story. Yeah, I haven't been taught to write at all. It's just my I said it, when it's, the thing that drives me is I value myself, I value what I did, I feel angry when the way I was treated. So all that combined to make me express myself. I could have hurt someone physically, but I think writing is expressing your frustrations. It's a good way. Yes, that's how I did it. So I don't know what to say, what more to say. Because while I was talking, I give one minute.
I hated handing those messages on to you because I hate those messages too. Yeah, thanks. My final thoughts are more some questions from you, and if you want to say anything, do grab me outside sometime. Age. I'm now in my 75th year. I want to write again, but my memory is becoming very bad. There's gaps everywhere. A Catholic nun said to me one methodology to use is memoirs by consultation. And I've been trying to start that process. I've started consultations with elders because there are so few elders left in our village now. We are an urban village in Papua New Guinea. We've been invaded by urbanization, and there's only a handful. I had 9 elders at my house, and that's a handful. And we've got to get them now. Lots of recording was done earlier by my daughter with elders, but to get the story properly, and even some of the political stories that I might want to perhaps put into my memoirs, I need consultation of other people's interpretations of it, because maybe I'm wrong in my interpretations. So that's one thing. Memoirs by consultation is an interesting concept I've started to try to move forward. I'm wondering too, should I write cameos within my memoirs? Because I did not grow up in Pari village. My children grew up in Pari village. And maybe I should get them to write some cameo stories within things. And the story of the mixed race, it's something I'd like to see written more of. I think I've seen something on that. The mixed race child. Where do they fit in the whole story of Melanesia? They're part of, but they're not part of when people find it convenient to have them not be part of. It's interesting. So I might try the idea of cameo stories within my autobiography. I don't know whether it would work. And then the use of language in your writing. I'm struggling with this because what I've written so far, in parts, I write it in Motu and try to use pure Motu, which is a true Motu. Now we have a pidgin form of Motu. And then I put a translation in English. Is that tedious, and would that be boring for a reader? And yet should we honour the language when it's something to do with custom? Or, and should I? Probably an editor will say, get rid of it. I don't know what they'd say. But I'm struggling with that. At present, I do have some parts conversational, very conversational. In the Motu, the way people said it. Like, I'm never addressed as Carol Kidu. I don't have a personal name. I'm not Carol. I used to be Dobi Sinana, Dobi's mother, or Buri Adabana, Buri's wife, but you don't use a person's personal name. Right? And so I've written it in that way to respect that custom, but should I do that or not, and things like that. So there's some things that I'm struggling with in trying to do my new memoirs, which will be more hard-hitting than the old rose-tinted glasses.
Thank you. Just final comments. I agree with your point with using young people. What we plan to do in the next year is to have 2 biography workshops at the UPNG campus and invite young people, young writers to come and get training on how to write biographies, mini biographies, even if it's just, like we've got so much technology now. You can record it on your phone and upload it and save it on the cloud and then transcribe it, and you've already got a first draft and then work on editing it. So yeah, to get more people, young people interested, even as a holiday assignment, go back and trace your genealogy, and it'll get them hooked on in the process. And they'll also reflect and learn more about themselves. And yeah, we're just looking forward to starting that process. So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Just a couple of final points for me. Dame Carol Kidd and I were talking about this yesterday, about capturing those stories while we still can. And I wanted to just also reflect that one of the people who'd been written about, she passed away just before we launched the book and got it completed. And we paid tribute to her when we launched the book. That was the late Mildred Sope. And so the importance of capturing those stories while we can. I was involved in a different project, another literary project, where one of the women who'd written the memoir, she died just before we published. And so, yeah, I feel so lucky and fortunate and blessed that I'm in a place where we can do that now and be able to have those stories, and people have it in their homes as a keepsake, as a memory for a loved one that may have gone, or someone who's still there with them. That's very important. And I wanted to also say, let's not apologize for telling our story. Let's be bold, let's be out there, and let's make it colorful, and let's work with the children to do it. One of the ways that we're doing is distributing through the Ministry of Education with the Curriculum Development Unit, so that children out in the remote communities can have access to the books, can listen to the recordings online or on radio, and be able to access it, but also tell their own stories. There's an activity in the middle of this, in the first volume, where children can start to reflect on their own journeys and write their own stories, or stories of someone they love in their family. So yes, that's very, very important for us as the Taputumas community in Vanuatu. Thank you.
Thank you. So please join me in thanking our panel with a big round of applause. And thank you also to everyone. I appreciate time is not always our friend, so thank you all for working with the time, and thank you to the organisers. I know we have one more presentation to go before the lunch break. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we are running a bit late, sorry about that, but we still have one presentation before lunch. So I'm really glad to have the honor to introduce Telstar, Jimmy, and his sister Plumi from Motalava. And Telstar is an activist, she's a writer, and she will present a poem referring to her grandma and tell her grandma's story. So now please give a big hand to Telstar.
Hi everyone. As Chris has mentioned, my name is Telstar. I am not a researcher. I'm really a poet, and here to just add some flavor to the MacFest Symposium. These first few days of the 2 weeks of the 7th MacFest of 2023 have been really amazing. My children and I have gone around to different sites and witnessed custom dances, cultural performances, traditional food preparations, historical narratives, and some contemporary musical performances. We've been in awe of the splashes of color, the diversity of cultures, the embrace of traditions, the unique Melanesian sounds. And we've also noticed that we are forever forging the present with the past. And yes, we would never be where we are without a history. And this is why storytelling is such an important part of the Melanesian culture. It's knowing our history. Our choreographed custom dances tell a story. The performances we pass through generations tell a story. Our food ingredients, the recipes, the meal preparations themselves tell a story. Our musical sounds, instruments, and rhythm tell a story. The artworks in pottery and handicraft, they all tell a story. Our dressings are immersed in deep cultural ties and identity, and our lifestyle resounds with stories of resilience, perseverance, and strength. And our migration speaks of hope, faith, and always a journey of truth. Therefore, our whole being of Melanesia is based on the stories that surround us. Sometimes we think of our ancestors and past generations as very far away in the past, but some of them are just around the corner, like a grandparent. And many times we only ponder the greatness of these grandparents after they have left us. I have a wonderful grandmother, and I am sure everyone in this room has one of those. So today I want to honor her for her teaching and storytelling. She spoke more with her actions and character than in words, and I am far from her. But I am using my own skills of poetry as an innovative way of storytelling. This poem is called Grandma, I See You. I hope you enjoy it and you think of that special grandmother too. Grandma, I see you. Grandma, I see you, hovering over that fire. Your burnt fingers do not cry. The smoke does nothing to your eye. The heat never does deter your why. As long as everyone has eaten, you sigh. Grandma, I see you, hastening to the reefs, knowing every tide and season. Old fishing techniques lead you like a beacon, preserving, conserving, and banning for a good reason. Imparting knowledge of the seas was always your mission. Grandma, I see you, hardening over your crops. Gardening was never an ordeal. Farming so many lands for the family's meal, and always having a treat to just satisfy their appeal. Your resilience in natural disasters was so unreal. Grandma, I see you, hosting those family ceremonies, guiding how food prep should be done, the weaving skills of a mat, basket of pan, kosher practices of leadership with the man, and naming every landmark, tribe, and clan. Grandma, I see you, humming to that tune. Custom dances from ancient times, many in repetition, a few in rhymes. They tell of languages, battles, and crimes, and of love, cultural traditions, and family lines. Grandma, I see you, heading the cultural dance, wearing your loins of nature and ocean, shrilling, singing, wailing, and percussion, showing the steps, maneuver, and motion, in sync with drums and bangle beating in fusion. Grandma, I see you, honoring your near and far, quietly supporting your husband, always lending, offering to lend families a hand. You owed and passed on so much of your land. You promoted peace and respect all along the sand. Grandma, I see you, hurrying to the village church, placing flowers at the altar, cleaning the dust. Morning and afternoon teas were a must. Training your children to pray and always be just. In God's love and faith, you had such unwavering trust. Grandma, I see you, hiding compassion in cheekiness. Instruction and laughter you combined. Teasing was a cover for your love undersigned. We left home afar, but we were always entwined. The care you ignited across seas left none of us behind. Grandma, I see you, hustling to leave a legacy. 3 generations witnessed your integrity, teaching us what it means to have an identity. You downplayed your rank with such serenity, but you were a true model for women in sovereignty. Grandma, when I see you no longer here with us, will there be one to teach like you? Guide and instruct us on skills like you do. Will all cultural practices remain, or just a few? How many of our traditions will still make it through? Grandma, when I see you no longer here with me, and the children and I continue to migrate and see development through, we will then use our acquired skills and you to extend your influence on arts and culture too. Grandma, when I see you no longer here with us, I promise to still teach my kids your ways, but because of the different times and days, I might make changes to help build my case, and hope that my daughters can still share in that space. Grandma, when I see you no more, may I vow to keep and renew your Torah virtue, your Vanuatu statute, your Melanesian value, and your legacy always alive and true. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Telstar. Please, a big round of applause for Telstar. Stay here for we have a few minutes, so if anyone has questions, Telstar was also part of the Taftumas project, and she is like a growing writer. Anyone has questions?
Hey Telstar, thank you very much for sharing the story. I'm Aletiana Razafi from Kanaki, Caledonia. I had a quick question for you. If and when you become a grandmother, what would you like to pass on?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think I'd like to leave behind stories, poetries that my children and my grandchildren can learn from. And I'd also like to leave with the female members of my family the knowledge that they can do it. Whatever they put their mind to, they'll be able to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Telstar. Any other questions? Mary?
Hi, Telstar. It's so nice to see you. I've just been talking to Mrs. Organised. Hi. Have you ever seen yourself, have you always seen yourself as a poet? When were you inspired by words? How did that come to be for you?
We've heard from the previous panel that writing comes when you're full of emotions. So when you're angry, you're upset about something, or you want to scream and shout. But like Pastor Seti said, you can't really get up and hit somebody, but rather you put it into words, and that's what happened for me. I was at a young age when my mother had to leave home, and with the emotions that were whirling around my mind, I was in secondary school, so I started putting pen to paper. And very soon I found out that a lot of people were enjoying them too, people who shared the same journey as me. And after a few years, I finally self-published a poetry book. It's called Journey of Truth. And people have asked me, when is the next book coming up? Well, whenever the imagination for more writing comes and more poems come along, then the second book will probably be out. But yeah, it's always based upon wanting to express your emotions. Thank you.